Hello friends, today's math lesson is 7.2, Exploring Fraction Multiplication Situations. Today's learning goal is to multiply unit and non-unit fractions by whole numbers. Take a minute to review your home links answers from 7-1, so pause the video and when you're finished looking over your answers you can press play. Okay, let's warm up our brains with some mental math fluency. So you're going to need a whiteboard and a marker or a piece of paper and a pencil or something to write on. You're going to decompose each of the following fractions in two different ways and write the equations on your slates. Remember that decompose means to find a way to add different fractions together to get the sum that is noted on the slide. So you're going to come up with a few different fractions that you can add together to get 4/5. The same thing for 5/6 and the same for 6/8. So pause the video while you come up with two different equations to add together to decompose 4/5, 5/6, and 6/8, and unpause when you're ready to check your answers. All right, two ways to decompose 4/5 are 1/5 plus 3/5 or 2/5 plus 2/5. Two different ways to decompose 5/6 are 2/6 plus 3/6 or 2/6 plus 2/6 plus 1/6. And two ways to decompose 6/8 are 2/8 plus 4/8 or 3/8 plus 3/8. There are also other ways that you might have gotten instead of these. These are not the only correct answers. All right, we're going to move on to mixed numbers. So we're going to still decompose these in two different ways each. So for 2 2/3, you're going to decompose in two different ways. 4 3/4 decompose or break up into two different ways. And 3 4/10 decompose or break up into two different equations. So pause the video while you write your answers and then come back to check. Okay, 2 2/3 can be 2 plus 2/3 or 3/3 plus 5/3. Those are just two examples of lots of different possibilities. 4 3/4 could be 16/4 plus 3/4 or 10/4 plus 7/4. And 3 4/10 could be 3 plus 4/10 or 20/10 plus 10/10 plus 4/10. All right, last warm up. You're going to decompose 2 1/2, 3 7/12, and 3 62/100. So go ahead and pause for one more time. 2 1/2 can be decomposed by adding 2 halves plus 3 halves, or 1/2 plus 2 halves plus 2 halves. 3 7/12 can be decomposed by adding 36/12 plus 7/12, or 3 plus 7/12. And 3 62/100 can be broken up into 3 plus 62/100, or 300 100ths plus 31 100ths plus 31 100ths. All right, let's do our math message. It says the Social Studies Club wants to make paper mache globes. To make the paste, each club member will mix 3/4 cup white glue with 1/4 cup water. The club has 9 members. They have 1 quart of water. Is there enough water for everyone? Notice that there are two different units in this question. So they're saying cups for this part, but in the question they're asking about quarts. So remember there are 4 cups in 1 quart. So pause the video while you solve to figure out if there is enough water for everyone, for all 9 members, and then come back to check your answer when you're finished. Okay, hopefully you figured out that yes, there will be enough water, and it'll take a total of 2 1/4 cups of water. In a quart, there are 4 cups. Something that you did not need to know to solve this question is how much white glue they would need. You really only needed to know how much water. So to solve this question, you could have added for each of the members 1/4 plus 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 1/4 equals 9/4. So that's 9 of them. And that is the same thing as 2 1/4, or 1/4 times 9 equals 2 1/4. You could have also said 4/4 is 1 whole. So 1, 2, 3, 4, that's a whole. And again, 1, 2, 3, 4 is another whole, and you have 1/4 left over. So if I box those out together, I can put those first 4 members together to get 1 cup of water, the next 4 members together to get the second cup of water, and then I still have 1/4 of a cup. So 8/4 equals 2, and the last fourth gives us a total of 2 1/4. Another possible way you could have solved this maybe is drawing a picture. So you could have taken a rectangle or a circle, split it into fourths. That whole thing equals a cup. So member 1, 2, 3, and 4 would share the first cup. Members 5, 6, 7, and 8 would share the second cup. And member 9 would have 1/4 for the last cup. So that's again a total of 2 and 1/4 cups. Same thing for fraction circles. If you decided to draw that instead, it's very similar to drawing your picture here. Okay, so 9 students need 2 1/4 cups of water. Between what two whole numbers does the number of cups of water needed lie? So this time you're trying to figure out, if you were to make a number line, 2 and 1/4 would fall between what whole numbers? You're counting 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Where would you put 2 and 1/4? So pause the video while you think about that and then come back to check your answer. You should have said between 2 and 3. So if you make a number line, you're writing 0, 1, 2, and then you would write 2 and 1/4 before you would write the number 3. How much water was left over after the activity? Pause the video while you decide how much water was left over. All right, well, we know that 4 cups was the total amount of water in 1 quart. So we started off with 4 cups of water, or 1 quart, and then we subtracted the 2 and 1/4 cups of water that they were using. So we end up with 1 3/4 cups of water left over. And between what two whole numbers does this answer lie? So pause the video one more time. Decide between what numbers is 1 3/4. Okay, so on a number line, you would write 0, 1, and then you would write 1 3/4 before you would get to 2. So your answer is between 1 and 2. Is there enough leftover water for everyone to make another batch of paste? So if we looked at the last slide, we know that they had 1 3/4 cups of water left over. Do they have enough to make another batch of paste, and how do you know? Pause the video while you figure this out. The answer is no, because as we know, they would need 2 and 1/4 cups of water altogether for everyone to make another batch. And they don't have that much because 1 3/4 is actually less than 2 and 1/4. With this leftover water though, 1 3/4 cups, how many students could make another batch of paste? We know that every student needs a 1/4 cup of water. So how many 1/4 cups are in 1 3/4? Pause the video so you can draw a picture to figure this out. 7 students could make another batch of paste because 7 groups of 1/4 equals 1 3/4, or 7 times 1/4 equals 1 3/4. So we could have 7 students make another batch of paste. All right, now let's focus on the glue. So we know that each club member is going to mix 3/4 cups of a white glue, and the club has 9 members. The question says the social studies club has 1/2 gallon of white glue. Will there be enough glue for everyone? So what we know is that the club has 9 members and each member needs 3/4 of a cup of glue. So if we multiply 9 times 3/4, we get 27/4, but that's a little bit more difficult to understand than if we turn it into a mixed number. So 27/4 is the same thing as 27 divided by 4, which equals 6 3/4 cups. But they're asking us about gallons. So if we have 6 3/4 cups, but the club has 1/2 of a gallon, let's look back at what we learned last time from the last lesson on Gallon Man. So 1/2 of a gallon, how many cups would that be? So take a second to look at this picture. Figure out how many cups would be in 1/2 of a gallon. So that's 2, 4, 6, 8. So really we have 1/2 a gallon or 8 cups. 1/2 a gallon is the same thing as 8 cups, and they're asking us, do we have enough? Well, they only need 6 3/4 cups, so the answer is yes, we actually have enough. We have a little bit extra. The next question asks us, between what two whole numbers does the number of cups of glue that are needed lie? Pause the video while you figure that out. Okay, so the number of cups needed is 6 3/4. So we need to figure out on our number line where we're going to place that. So we know 6 3/4 should be right about here. So what two numbers is that in between? You should have said 6 and 7. Whoops, 6 and 7. Okay, let's try to figure out now how much glue was left over after the activity. So we know that we needed that we had 8 cups of glue to start with, but we used 6 3/4 cups. So we need to subtract 8 minus 6 3/4. So go ahead and pause the video while you solve that. So 8 minus 6 3/4 equals 1 1/4 cups left over. And on your number line again, try to figure out what two whole numbers, 1 1/4, falls in between. So you should say between 1 and 2. All right, let's try to figure out now if there is enough leftover glue for everyone to make another batch of paste. So we know that we have 9 members, and we know that each member needs 3/4 cups of white glue. We have 1 1/4 cups left over altogether. So let's see if we can pause the video and figure out if we have enough for everybody to make another batch. The answer is no, because in order for everybody to make another batch, we would need a total of 6 3/4 cups, but we only have 1 1/4, which is less than 6 3/4. So with our leftover glue, since not all 9 members can make another batch, how many students could make another batch? And how do you know that? Pause the video one more time. Okay, each person would need 3/4 cups. And since 1 1/4 is greater than 3/4, we know that 2 groups of 3/4 equals 1 1/2, and 1/4 is less than 1 1/2, so 2 students would be actually too many. All right, take out your math journal and you're going to work on page 232. You can come back here to check your answers when you're finished, but let's go over the directions really quickly. So the title is Baking Muffins. It says Suma and her sister Pooja are baking 12 blueberry wheat muffins for breakfast. The recipe lists the following ingredients: 1 cup white flour, ½ cup whole wheat flour, 2 teaspoons baking powder, 3/4 cup blueberries, ½ teaspoon salt, 1 egg, ½ cup skim milk, 2/3 cup honey, 1/4 cup cooking oil, and 3/8 teaspoon cinnamon. So solve the number stories, and in the space below each problem, use pictures or equations to show what you did to find your answers. The first question asks you about tripling the recipe, so that means you need to multiply by 3, and you're only looking at how many teaspoons of baking powder they need now. Just be careful when you get to future problems if you're going to need to change units at all. A lot of the units are in cups. Some are in teaspoons. If they ask you anything about converting to quarts or gallons, make sure that you have your picture of the gallon man out so that you can convert like you did in the last lesson. So here I'm going to ask you to pause the video so you can work on this page and then come back to check your answers. All right, let's go over our answers now that you're finished your journal page. Number 1, the sisters want to triple the recipe. How many teaspoons of baking powder do they need now? 6 teaspoons. So you should have done 3 times 2 teaspoons. And letter B, how many teaspoons of salt do they need now? So they originally needed 1/4 teaspoon. If you multiply that by 3, you end up with 3/4 teaspoons. C, how many cups of whole wheat flour do they now need? ½ cup times 3 gives us 1 1/2 cups. And D, between what two whole numbers does your answer to problem 1C lie? And it should be between 1 and 2. Number 2, how many cups of blueberries did they use? Suma and Pooja decided to bake 48 muffins instead of 12, so they multiplied it by 4. So it's 12/4 or 3 cups. And here's a picture to show that. So you did 3/4 cups times 4 equals 12/4 or 3 total cups. Letter B, how many teaspoons of cinnamon did they use if they multiplied their recipe by 4? And they originally needed 3/8 of a teaspoon, so 3/8 times 4 gives us 12/8 or 1 4/8 or 1 1/2. And there's a picture to show that. Now, letter C, how many cups of honey did they use? So they started with 2/3 of a cup, and then they ended up with 8/3 or 2 2/3. They either multiplied by 4 or added 2/3 4 times. D, between what two whole numbers does your answer to problem 2C lie? Between 2 and 3. It's a little more than 2 and a little less than 3. All right, last one, number 3. The sisters used 1 1/2 cups of cooking oil. How many batches of muffins did they bake? So it originally called for 1/4 cup of cooking oil, so you have to figure out how many 1/4 are in 1 1/2, and the answer is 6. All right, to wrap up, please do your home links and your math boxes and post home links on CC.